They're going to be pretty busy today in the Trump transition. And they had a slate of people that Donald Trump was scheduled to meet with again today, including Dave Stewart. That name sounds familiar. He's the chairman of Worldwide Technology right here in St. Louis. So that is of some interest to the local crowd, at least. Fox News Channel's James Rosen is joining us right now, and he's covering the Trump transition today. James, how are you?
Marc, great to be with you.
Absolutely. Are we expecting any announcements pending today from the Trump folks?
Well, we were expecting a couple that might come today. But it's been a fairly fluid process, as you've had a chance to observe as well. And so far, nothing momentous to report today. But, of course, all eyes remain fixed on the jockeying and the maneuvering surrounding the position of Secretary of State. And we have been hearing for some time that Mitt Romney is in the running for that job. But some of the tweets by Donald Trump's senior advisor and someone acting as a spokesperson for the transition, Kellyanne Conway, really seem to have cast some shade on the idea that Romney has a real chance.
Yeah, I was reading an article in The Hill today where they said it alleged that Trump was furious with Kellyanne Conway for what she'd had to say. Have you heard anything on that?
Yeah, that was reported on Morning Joe today.
Okay.
But again, it just kind of strains credulity to imagine that a political operative as sophisticated as Kellyanne Conway, who is, after all, the first female ever to be named to lead a presidential campaign and therefore to win one, would be so naive as to imagine that she could pressure her boss through a series of tweets that she might unilaterally decide to send. That just strains credulity to imagine.
It does baffle a little bit, doesn't it? Let me ask you about Sheriff David Clarke from Milwaukee. Is he a legitimate contender for DHS or something like that?
I should think so. He has been among those summoned to make an appearance before the president-elect. I believe that might have been today, in fact. It's hard to keep all the announcements of visits straight. But absolutely, Sheriff Clarke was a voice during the campaign, and particularly when there was a spate of attacks on police officers that I think synced up quite neatly with what Donald Trump was saying about law and order in America. And, of course, he would also bring diversity to the ranks of the senior advisors as well.
He certainly would. So all we know is that we think we may see a full cabinet sometime between now and Christmas. They haven't really put a deadline on this thing, have they?
Well, and if you look back over recent presidential administrations and transitions, where Donald Trump is right now in this process is not extraordinary for being lax or tardy. It was 6 weeks after the election that President-elect Nixon was able to unveil his entire cabinet in one sitting. I think that's the way to do it, personally. We had no presidents tried that since. But so far, he seems to be pretty much on time, and I have the feeling that, as they say, on January 20, they'll hit the ground running, or at least as prepared as any administration can be in those early days.
James, do you have a feel from your reporting of press secretary? I mean, is Laura Ingraham? I've heard her name tossed around. Are there any other names that you've heard?
The most recent thing that I have heard is that Laura Ingraham may be drawing back from this job only because of personal reasons. She has young children, and as you know, it's a very demanding position. She hasn't told me that directly. So, as I say, everything remains fairly fluid. But we've also heard about our Fox News colleague Monica Crowley, perhaps named as a potential press secretary, and still others think it could wind up being Sean Spicer, who is the chief strategist and communications director presently for the Republican National Committee, who has segued into working on such matters on communications for the transition itself. And if he does follow his boss, Reince Priebus, into the White House, that would mean some pretty hefty representation for the Republican National Committee in the new White House.
Absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. James Rosen, enjoy your work on Fox. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Marc.
Absolutely. Thank you.